guys, after giving you a bit of a rant on how bad Napoleon was and seeing how it is that this is not my typical style of content, I am going to give you guys one last film review to kind of end the year. And this right here is on a film that was actually pretty good, and that there being The Iron Claw. Now, if you are a wrestling fan, you are probably familiar with this piece of work, meaning that you're probably familiar with the Von Erich family and the Von Erich name, and of course the tragedy. Now, this particular review is not going to have any actual honest-to-God spoilers in it. I don't see how you can actually spoil this if you already know the nature of the Von Erichs and exactly what happened, especially all the tragedies. What I will say is that a lot of people don't realize that it was actually 6 Von Erich sons. The oldest child died in an accident in the, I can't remember the exact year, but it was while patriarch Fritz Von Erich and his wife were on the road. As a matter of fact, Kevin Von Erich, the last surviving child, was a part of that little road trip. Then it was right before their third child, David Von Erich, was born. Now, you probably got a hold of this particular video, and you probably heard me say it like that, and you're probably, this guy's obviously not a wrestling fan, when in reality I am. I know about this right here a pretty good deal, because the Von Erich name is very, let's just say it's synonymous with pro wrestling, especially in the early days, back when the territories existed. Now, I'm not going to sit here and give you guys an actual full-throated video on the territories and how that came to be and how wrestling is today or anything like that. What I'm going to be doing is just talking about the film itself and what I actually liked about the film. And a year where we had extremely bad films, extremely bad movies, this right here is one of the few ones that was actually good. And I do advise you guys go check it out. Even if you're not a wrestling fan, it's still a good movie. It is sad, but if you know the nature of the Von Erichs and exactly what happened in that time frame, then you already know the story that this family was marred in tragedy. David Von Erich died under suspicious circumstances in Japan. Carrie Von Erich would self-delete in 1993. I hate to say it that way, but because of YouTube's algorithm, it makes it hard. Just to say certain words, just don't agree with it. And of course, Mike Von Erich and Chris Von Erich both also did the exact same thing as Carrie. Now, I'm showing you guys a photo of Carrie here. This is back when he was in the WWE, right before he went over. Carrie, of course, was the modern-day warrior in the 1980s. Fritz Von Erich, the head of the family, he kind of wanted Carrie to be the guy to kind of take over, even though David Von Erich, the oldest, well, not the oldest child, but the second oldest child of the remaining living ones at the time, back in the 1980s when World Class Championship Wrestling was created, he was initially viewed to be the big star, and then it was Carrie. But of course, Kevin Von Erich, the last remaining last remaining son, he was the second oldest child out of the technical 6. Now, one child was not mentioned, and that would be Chris Von Erich. He was not brought up in the film, and I saw the reason why the filmmakers did not want to bring Chris up is because it would have added more to the runtime, and they didn't think they could get to his story. Chris Von Erich's story, by the way, is very tragic as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you guys some links to that actual tragedy itself. That way you guys can see exactly what happened if you're interested in it. Because like I said, this is not I wouldn't call this a historical review of a film or a full-throated reveal in detail, but I'm saying just giving you guys my initial thoughts on this movie and why it is you guys might want to go check it out, and why it is it's not fully the downer that people have made it out to be. So I advise you guys go check that out. With that there being said, let's go ahead and get to the actual film review. Before we go any further, I do need to say this right. I'm not going to be providing much detail on the Von Erich family itself. It's not because I'm not prepared for this video or anything. It's because there are, like I mentioned before, the first section, there are a lot of links, a lot of things you guys can see. If you're really into this, I advise you guys go check it out. I'm, for the most part, just talking about the film itself. That way, there's the whole purpose of this video here. And while it did not say spoilers, the reason why I'm not saying spoilers or no spoilers is because if you already know the story of the Von Erichs, then you already know what happened. I will say that I do think the film did do a good job of portrayal of exactly what happened in the family. I really like the way that David, Kevin, and of course Carrie were portrayed. I may have said it before, but it does feel a little bit lacking that Chris was never really mentioned, but I understand why they did it the way they did. I do want to portray the guy who played Fritz von Erich. He did a very good job of playing a very hard-nosed father who cared about the business, and I do think that Zac Efron's performance as Kevin von Erich was very good. I mean, Zac Efron's a guy who I think is starting to show you that he actually does have the range to play something outside of like what he played in Neighbors, for example. I mean, look, if you saw the Netflix film that they did on Ted Bundy, where he basically starred as Bundy, then you would see that Zac Efron is obviously somebody who can act, even though you didn't really like the way that Bundy was portrayed in the film, because we all know who Ted Bundy was. He was a sick freak. And they tried to put a bit of a positive spin on things, but still, Efron proves that he can actually act and hold the screen. Now, will this film get any Oscar nominations or anything like that? No. And I think after a year full of very bad films, this right here is kind of like the top of the films that were actually done, but it's done with a small budget. It probably won't get no Oscar nod or won't get any actual fanfare on, well, no fanfare in the media. It'll definitely get some online because a lot of people have already made videos about this. It was, like I said before, it was obviously a very good film, but it's going to be kind of brushed under the bottom of the barrel of all the other films that came out in 2023, which of course is in fact sad. But let's go ahead and get back to the movie itself. Basically what the movie does is it dramatizes exactly how it was that Fritz von Erich created his family. Initially, that's pretty much what it does. It starts out with them on the road, with a very young Kevin and a very young David, and it's right after their oldest child, Jack, had just passed away, had been electrocuted. I think it was touching a pot. I think what happened was he touched an electrical piece of equipment, and then he eventually fell over, passed out, and drowned in a nearby hole. I think that's what it was. Please don't beat me up in the comment section if I got that one wrong, or just add some additional clarification. But don't worry, you guys will get a little bit more detail on that if you choose to watch the videos that I'm putting in the description box itself and the actual the links themselves. The thing is this right here. The film wanted to focus for the most part on the drama that was going on with the family. It is a true story. This family did, in fact, deal with tragedy at unprecedented levels. I mean, think about it. You're the mother of 6 kids and you lose every child except for one. And that's obviously something that's pretty bad to go through. And if you watch the Dark Side of the Ring documentary on the Von Erichs, then you would know how Fritz had got right there towards the very, very end of his life. Now, this film, in my honest opinion, tries to portray Fritz von Erich as the bad guy, seeing how it was he was the family patriarch, he was the guy in charge, he was the guy who was pushing all the boys to actually get into wrestling, and it makes it look like he's an unsympathetic and uncaring father, and that he cares more about the business than he does his own boys. I don't think that was really and truly the case. I think it was more a case of Fritz not really knowing how or understanding how to love his boys. For example, Mike Von Erich, and this is very tragic. Mike Von Erich is the 5th son out of the 6. Mike was very big into music and probably should not have been involved in wrestling. As a matter of fact, there's another reason why it is. I think they should have included Chris Von Erich's story as well, because Chris was not actually built for the sport, even though he wanted to actually do the sport. Let's just say that they never felt like he could measure up. And same thing happened to Mike. Mike, of course, his situation involves actually a shoulder injury that but ended up getting toxic shock syndrome as a result of it. And it was actually a miracle that he survived that, but he would eventually fall into some very bad habits, including drugs, sleeping pills in particular, with alcohol. And he would eventually, as most of you guys already know, he would eventually do that word I can't say here on this platform. David Von Erich, who was actually viewed to be the possibly the best worker, the first real big star, he went away to Japan on a show and he died while overseas. Now, the autopsy on him revealed that he died of an intestinal situation, but there were a lot of conspiracies around him where people thought that it's very possible that he may have self-deleted as a result of a drug overdose. However, the autopsies came back and showed the exact opposite. The theory got started really with Ric Flair. We'll get to Ric Flair in a second because he was featured in the film where somebody was portraying him in the film, or we'll get that here in a second. That's like my one actual complaint with the film was his portrayal. The thing was this right here. With David, the conspiracy theory got started that, and it was actually Ric Flair who said that Bruiser Brody found a bag full of drugs and basically flushed him while they were in Japan. Now, we don't know the full validity of that story because, sadly, Bruiser Brody is also no longer with us. That's a completely separate incident altogether that happened in Puerto Rico. under Carlos Colon's. I'm not going to go fully into that one, but if you're into wrestling and you know the story, please say something in the comment section. I'll try to leave some links to what happened to Bruiser Brody too. But the thing is this right here. David Von Erich seemed to be the start of a series of tragedies, and Kevin Von Erich, being the oldest remaining brother left, he had to endure all of this. Basically, the entire world was falling around him is pretty much what happened. Kerry Von Erich, who would eventually go to the WWE as the character, the Texas Tornado, he was wrestling on one leg. Now, I'm not going to go too far into that story because it's... I'll put it this way here. A lot of people did not realize that the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, was operating on only one leg. Not really portrayed in detail the accident. It's basically what it does is it shows him after he gets the belt, after David Von Erich's death. Basically what it does is it shows him riding around a motorcycle at night, and you can obviously see that demons are creeping up in him because drugs and alcohol were definitely an issue, especially for performers in the 1980s. Basically, what happened to Kerry was Kerry crashed into a parked police car. He injured his hip, and he ended up injuring his foot in the process. It said that he went out while it was healing, and he ended up re-injuring it, and they eventually had to amputate his foot as a result. Either way, it's a shocker to a lot of people. A lot of people don't realize that he wrestled for the longest time in extreme amounts of agony and extreme amounts of pain. So therefore, he's probably going to use drugs and alcohol to help him cope with the pain and also the emotional problems to go along with it. Kerry would eventually self-delete in 1993 on his father's land, and they portrayed that. Basically what they did with this case was they decided to switch what happened to Chris with what happened to Kerry. They decided to do that because obviously, you know, as I mentioned earlier, Chris Von Erich's story was not mentioned in the film. Now, you've just listened to me talk about this film and some of the incidents, and you probably think to yourself that it's an extremely sad film. And for the most part, it is because it is tragedy. The family endured some of the... I mean, look, imagine you're a parent and you have 6 boys and 5 of them die. One of them under mysterious circumstances, 3 more do it by way of self-deletion. And just imagine for a second that happens. And of course, the oldest child died by accident. Imagine the amount of hell that a parent was going through at that time. So yes, the story is in fact tragic, but it does end on a bit of a heartwarming note, which I will get to here in a second. So there is one thing I do want to address, and it's the portrayal of Ric Flair. Now guys, Ric Flair is possibly the greatest wrestler ever, greatest character, greatest promo ever. You need to tell me that this is the best you could do?
Daddy's boy is going to take that from me.
Obviously, a far cry from the Rick that we know from the 80s.
I'm still riding on that limousine, and I am still driving the women in this world completely.
This right here, by the way, seemed to be the only complaint that anybody had with this movie was the portrayal of Ric Flair and the actual impersonation, the way he looked. And I understand it's very hard to find certain actors who can capture the look, but the impersonation itself, the actual feel of what an individual is like and how they sound is something that felt a little bit lacking. However, for as sad as this film may have been, and let me go ahead and end the video here, it is a bit heartwarming at the very end. You see, there are several documentaries on the platform. The one that they did from Vice, Dark Side of the Ring. There's also the World Class Championship, Triumph and Tragedy of World Class Wrestling, or World Class Championship Wrestling, which I'll try to link in the description box. There's something that Kevin has always said, which is, I used to have 5 brothers, and now I'm no longer a brother, which is extremely heartbreaking here. But at the very end of the film, he has this moment with his 2 sons where he says the exact same things, and he's about to break down. He's just sitting there thinking about all the loss and the tragedy. Well, his sons look at him and say, "That's okay, Daddy. We'll be your brothers." And of course, the film ends with a bit of a photo montage of the Von Erichs being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, with Kevin, of course, being the recipient. And eventually, it ends with photos of him in Hawaii with his family, because Kevin did, in fact, have 4 kids and did have 13 grandchildren. So while it was, in fact, a tragedy for him, his life still ended up being very plentiful, and it's still very plentiful today because he is still alive today living in Hawaii with his family. So while things were very dark in his life, he did, in fact, eventually still be successful on the level that he was able to have a family that obviously loves him and cares for him to this day. So while the film, for the most part, was a bit sad, it does have a bit of a white pill towards the end. With that one right there being said, though, guys, I'm going to go ahead and put an end to this video now. There's going to be 2 videos released on Thursday. We're going to be talking about the situation in New York. Apparently, Eric Adams has revolted against the current regime. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Make sure you guys hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, sound off in the comment section. I would love to hear what you guys have got to say, and I'll see you guys later.